Dune opens by telling us about a desert world called Arrakis, known to most as Dune, and about a precious substance called spice that is worth more than gold. The voiceover explains that spice enables space travel, gives long life, and sharpens the mind, and its control shapes politics across the galaxy. We learn that many noble houses want Arrakis, while native people called the Freemen live in the desert and survive against incredible odds. The story centers on House Atreides, a noble family asked to rule Arrakis in place of their bitter enemies. This move appears to be an honor but carries a hidden danger that will test every character. The film lays its foundation by linking politics, religion, ecology, and destiny into one complex world. On the ocean world Caladan we meet the Atreides family in quiet domestic moments that show who they are and what they value. Duke Leto is a wise, restrained leader who seeks alliances rather than simple conquest, and he loves his people deeply. Lady Jessica, who serves the secretive Bene Gesserit order, trains their son Paul in special mental and physical disciplines that make her family unusual. Paul shows unusual intelligence, curiosity, and dreams that disturb him with images of another world and a strange girl. The family prepares to leave Caladan with mixed feelings of hope and worry because the new assignment to Arrakis will change everything. Small scenes of teaching, training, and intimacy help viewers bond to these characters before danger arrives. Early scenes give us key background about the Bene Gesserit and their long plans across generations, and a visit from Reverend Mother Mohiam sets the stage. In a cold chamber, Paul endures a test of nerve and discipline where pain and control define his strength, showing that he is not an ordinary boy. The Bene Gesserit's plans include breeding and prophecy, and their presence colors the story with a sense of secret manipulation. The film uses these quiet, tense scenes to explain deep ideas about power, destiny, and human training without losing clarity. This opening sequence prepares learners to watch a story that blends inner struggle with outer politics. The film's careful world building and visual restraint make these scenes both vivid and instructive for advanced learners. When the Emperor orders House Atreides to take over Arrakis, the command reads like both reward and trap in equal measure. Leto senses danger because the Harkonnens, the previous rulers of Arrakis, will not give up their power willingly, and the Emperor fears the Atreides' rising influence. Leto accepts the assignment because he sees a chance to ally with the Freemen and rule wisely, but he knows that enemies wait in secret. The political tension is sharpened by ministers, spies, and the hidden Sardaukar troops who serve the Emperor in secrecy. The film uses formal negotiations and private doubts to show how political leaders must weigh honor against survival. This assignment to Arrakis starts the chain of events that will define Paul's future and change the balance of power in the universe. The Atreides leave the green world of Caladan for the dry splendor of Arrakis, and this move becomes a powerful cinematic contrast. Arrakis greets them with vast dunes, harsh light, and enormous machines that harvest the spice from the sand in noisy, dangerous operations. Conrad and the crew explain the harvesting processes, while Duke Leto meets Dr. Leet Kynes, the planetologist who respects the desert and knows its dangers. Paul walks among the spice harvesters and witnesses how fragile human systems are when the sand itself can swallow machines in minutes. These arrival scenes teach viewers about technology, environment, and the human cost of resources. The cinematography emphasizes scale, making Arrakis both beautiful and deadly. Life on Arrakis forces new habits and introduces the most critical logistic problem, water scarcity and the need for still suits. The Freemen have learned to live by recycling every drop of moisture using clothing and ceremony, and their culture reflects survival-first thinking. The Atreides' advisors must adapt quickly because life on Arrakis is governed by rules that outsiders often fail to respect. Paul listens to Freemen stories and watches their skill, learning that survival depends on humility as much as technology. These sequences show an ecological lesson: control of a resource changes people as much as it changes politics. For learners, the movie uses practical detail to explain abstract themes of scarcity and human adaptation. As Duke Leto works to build local alliances, he risks resources and life to protect spice crews and to learn how the harvesters operate safely. In one early rescue mission, a spice crew is attacked by a sandworm, and the Atreides attempt a daring recovery that reveals the planet's true danger. The machine drivers and their crews are dependent on careful procedure, and one wrong move invites disaster. Leto's personal leadership in these moments impresses both his people and some Freeman observers, who note that he acts with honor. These scenes show the difference between rule by fear and rule by respect, and they establish Leto's character deeply. Students of leadership will find practical lessons here about humility, accountability, and the cost of responsibility. The Harkonnens, who have retreated into the shadows, weave a plan of revenge that is both patient and cruel by design. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen and his followers plot to retake Arrakis, and they use deception, bribery, and torture to weaken the Atreides. Dr. Yu, the Atreides' physician, carries a secret despair because the Harkonnens hold his loved one captive and use that pain to force a betrayal. The film builds dread through small moments of sabotage and the revelation that larger forces conspire against Duke Leto. Scenes of quiet plotting and inner betrayal create a sense of impending calamity, and the audience feels how loyalty can be bought with suffering. These moments deepen the moral complexity of the world. Power here uses personal tragedy as a weapon. Paul's visions grow stronger as spice and stress combine to open his mind to possible futures and to a culture he has only read about. He sees flashes of a girl in the desert, of war and religious fervor, and of himself as a leader feared and followed by many. These dreams are not simple premonitions but shifting, layered images that ask Paul to choose the shape of his future. Lady Jessica continues to prepare him with Bene Gesserit techniques that increase control over body and mind, teaching him to speak with authority and to read people quickly. The film uses Paul's inner life to teach viewers about ambiguity. Knowledge both helps and traps the knower. For advanced learners, these scenes are rich in metaphor and also in grounded detail about training and discipline. As suspicion rises, assassination attempts and secret surveillance remind us how dangerous noble life can be in this universe. A cunning spy device nearly reaches Paul, showing that enemies sometimes use small, precise tools instead of open force. Leto Circle tightens security, and Duncan Idaho, the trusted swordmaster, scouts for danger and builds bridges with the Freemen. These domestic scenes, filled with planning and quiet courage, highlight the human cost of political trust and the need for competent allies. The film balances battles with conversations so viewers can see the nuts and bolts work of leadership. Each scene contributes small lessons about caution, loyalty, and the human networks that sustain power. Night brings betrayal to Arrakis when the Harkonnens and their secret allies strike with swift terror. Yu disables the protective shields and allows the attack to begin, a move that breaks the Atreides' defenses and brings the Sardaukar into open slaughter. The assault is violent and precise, and the film shows how the Emperor's hidden support for the Harkonnens makes the coup impossible to repel. Soldiers die defending their lord, courtyards are turned to ash, and the palace of House Atreides falls into chaos. People who believed in honor must now face raw cruelty, and the film shows how systems designed for stability can collapse quickly. In this act of violence the plot turns from political intrigue to desperate survival. Duke Leto is captured and confronted by the Baron, and the scenes of humiliation and sacrifice are intensely personal and tragic. Yu gives Leto a poisoned tooth as a last tool of vengeance, hoping the Duke will use it to kill the Baron and avenge the Atreides. Leto bites down, releasing gas in an attempt to strike the enemy, but the Baron escapes with help and the plan fails to return his family. The Duke's sacrifice is not wasted because it reveals the courage and moral fiber that inspired loyalty among his people. These moments underscore how the story values human dignity even in defeat. For learners, the scene shows how moral choices matter even when outcomes are tragic. After the fall of Arrakis, the planet seems more dangerous than ever because the Harkonnens send their soldiers to crush dissent and the Freemen retreat into secret. Paul and Lady Jessica are captured but somehow manage to use their training and cunning to escape into the open desert. In the night they drop from the Harkonnen forces and run with little more than survival kits hidden by a remorseful Yu. The idea of being abandoned in the sands becomes a test of both skill and inner strength, because Arrakis does not forgive mistake or weakness. These desert sequences emphasize environment as antagonist, teaching listeners how setting shapes fate. The escape also sets up Paul's transformation from a political heir to a fugitive with a strange destiny. The desert is brutal and relentless, and the film makes its cruelty a school for those who must survive there. Still suits must be fitted precisely to conserve every breath, and the freeman's discipline in caring for water is explained by ritual and practicality. Paul and Jessica learn to move differently, to weigh every step against thirst and heat, and to read tracks that threaten to betray them. They encounter the ruin of spice harvesters and the destructive presence of sandworms that make the dunes unpredictable and alive. The film uses this harshness to teach about adaptation. People who survive Arrakis change to match its rules. For English learners, the desert scenes provide strong, concrete vocabulary about survival and environment. When the freemen find Paul and Jessica, tension rises because the desert people have reason to mistrust outsiders and their motives. Stilgar, a measured and cautious leader, tests Leto's heirs to decide whether to accept them, and the tribe's cultural rituals reveal deep values about loyalty and worth. James, a freeman warrior, challenges Paul to a fight to the death, and the duel forces Paul to make a choice he has not expected. Winning the fight proves Paul's skill and opens a place for him among the freemen, though that acceptance does not erase the complexity of his destiny. These scenes show the difference between formal political power and the authority gained through trial. Viewers can learn how rituals and testing form group identity and social trust. Chani appears among the freemen, and she is the woman Paul has seen in his visions, offering the story a human face for his dreams. Their meeting is quiet but charged, and the film makes clear that the desert girl is not a mere fantasy but a living person with her own skills, doubts, and strength. Paul watches her, and his dreams and waking life begin to intersect in ways that confuse and motivate him. The relationship between them unfolds slowly, mixing learning with personal feeling and the weight of prophecy. Chani teaches Paul practical skills of desert survival and also shows him how freeman community life balances war and daily care. Their connection becomes a key emotional anchor for Paul as he moves between worlds. Inside the Sietch, or freeman home, Paul and Jessica learn the tribe's laws, rituals, and the meaning of collective sacrifice. Jessica undergoes a spiritual test that the Bene Gesserit view with both scientific interest and religious awe, and the tribe watches with new respect for her powers. She uses Bene Gesserit ways to survive and to help the tribe, deepening the trust between the newcomers and the freemen. Paul studies their songs, prayer forms, and tactical skill, absorbing a political culture that differs from European-style courts. These scenes show cultural immersion as a slow, disciplined process rather than a sudden conversion. For learners, this part of the movie is rich with vocabulary about tradition, ritual, and social cohesion. As Paul trains with the freemen, he learns to think like a desert fighter and to use the land itself as a weapon. The freemen show tactics that are less about direct confrontation and more about movement, concealment, and the power of surprise. Paul begins to imagine how these tactics could unbalance an occupying force dependent on visible machines and open ground. His training with weapons and with the voice, a Bene Gesserit skill to command others, makes him more dangerous than he first seemed. The film stresses practice and habit as the foundations of leadership, not only destiny or magic. Students can study these sequences to understand how skills combine with local knowledge to produce strategic advantage. While Paul grows among the freemen, the Harkonnens tighten their grip on Arrakis and order cruelty to suppress the people and speed up spice production. Rabban, the Baron's heavy-handed nephew, rules by terror and crushes resistance through taxation and violence. The film shows the predictable effect of brutal occupation, short-term profit for rulers and long-term hatred among the people. As spice flows more erratically, the Harkonnens worry about consequences from higher powers and fight among themselves for control. These power plays highlight the film's theme that greed blinds rulers to the social cost of their actions. For learners, the Harkonnen scenes are a study of how oppressive policies create the conditions for revolt. Paul's visions deepen and become terrifyingly clear about the future that might spring from his leadership. He glimpses armies, religious fervor, and mass movements that could sweep across worlds if people follow his name as prophecy. He realizes that his rise could produce not only liberation but also costly fanaticism and bloodshed. This idea haunts him because he does not want to be the instrument of endless war, yet he cannot deny the momentum that belief brings. The film uses Paul's inner conflict to teach subtle lessons about leadership, responsibility, and the dangers of messianic politics. Advanced learners can study these scenes to discuss how ideals can become forces that consume their makers. Stilgar and other Freeman leaders cautiously accept Paul more fully as he proves himself in combat and in spirit, yet they still demand humility and respect for their customs. Paul begins to receive a new name and identity among the tribe that ties him to local myth and animal knowledge. The name Muad'Dib emerges as a symbol of survival and subtle intelligence, and the tribe views this symbolic name with both hope and caution. In informal councils and campfires, the freemen test Paul with questions about leadership and the cost of action. These scenes show how identity is built in community, through shared language and ritual. The film makes cultural naming feel like both honor and burden. Under Paul's influence, small raids against Harkonnen spice operations begin to cut production and weaken the occupying forces' confidence. The Freemen's knowledge of the terrain gives them a tactical advantage as they strike fast and vanish into dunes where conventional armies cannot follow. These raids create more than economic damage, they produce a moral awakening among oppressed people who see that resistance is possible. The Harkonnens react with brutality, but each punishment makes more recruits for the Freeman cause. These action sequences are carefully staged to show how small, disciplined guerrilla actions can change the meaning of power. Learners can watch these scenes to understand the dynamics of asymmetric warfare. Meanwhile, the legacies of Leto's diplomacy remain important because his earlier efforts to respect the Freemen planted seeds of trust that now blossom. Allies like Duncan Idaho and Gurney Halleck, who represent personal loyalty and warrior skill, continue to appear as constants of devotion to House Atreides. The film reminds viewers that institutions matter but that individuals make the critical moral choices when institutions fall. Short scenes of friendship, memory, and quiet conversation preserve Duke Leto's influence on how Paul decides to act. The movie balances large political scenes with these human moments to keep the story emotionally honest. For advanced learners, these moments often supply the best vocabulary for describing ethical leadership. As the Freemen organize, Paul's internal authority grows because he can combine Bene Gesserit training with desert tactics and real, earned trust. He learns not to pretend to be their prophet but to act in ways that deserve faith from a people forged by hardship. His acceptance is a slow choreography of performance, restraint, and demonstration, not a single miraculous act. Those watching him begin to shape their own expectations around his choices, and collective imagination becomes a political instrument. Paul's struggle is therefore both inwardly psychological and outwardly strategic. The film shows leadership as a process of becoming, not a moment of revelation. In Quiet Nights, Paul and Chani share stories of loss, survival, and hope, humanizing the idea of prophecy and making it about real love and daily hardship. Their scenes are tender and teach that even amid cosmic stakes, personal attachments shape decisions and limit the reach of power. Chani's presence grounds Paul in the present and reminds him of the people who will follow, not only the idea they worship. These personal moments instruct viewers about balance. A leader must retain ties to human needs or risk becoming an abstract force. The film uses these intimate scenes to slow its tempo and remind audiences what is at stake beyond the political chessboard. For English learners, dialogue here offers idiomatic expressions about devotion and restraint. As the Freeman campaign grows, the Harkonnens find it harder to rule a planet whose people refuse to accept tyranny quietly. Rabban's violence increasingly alienates local workers and managers, and supply lines for spice are disrupted by sabotage and fear. The Baron, watching from his dark halls, understands that brute force cannot solve this unique problem because the land itself favors those who know it. These tense strategic scenes show how occupation without legitimacy creates instability rather than order. The film teaches that environmental intelligence trumps simple military superiority in some contexts. Students can use these moments to discuss governance and legitimacy in occupied regions. Far from Arrakis, in imperial circles, the Emperor watches news and intelligence that hint at problems brewing and wonders whether a greater hand is guiding events. He sees House Atreides' influence as a problem that must be checked, and his secret deployment of the Sardaukar soldiers under Harkonnen command reveals the zero-sum nature of imperial politics. The Emperor's choices are pragmatic and ruthless. He fears rivals more than subjects and hides that fear behind formal protocol. These political backstage scenes reveal the cynicism of centralized power and its reliance on covert force. For learners, watching bureaucratic decision-making in the film is a lesson in how institutions can erode moral responsibility. The film's climax builds as the Freeman's strength becomes visible and as Paul and Jessica step more fully into the desert's hidden life and purposes. Duncan Idaho and others conduct dangerous missions to rescue and gather intelligence, and the film shows the human cost of every triumph. The desert's unpredictability continues to be the main test of any plan because sandworms, weather, and environment can undo technological advantage in a moment. The Freemen plan carefully to protect their people and to avoid being drawn into fights that favor only spectacle over strategy. These tactical scenes emphasize discipline, patience, and the power of lived local expertise. Students can learn vocabulary about planning and constraint from these sequences. In the final acts, the film combines spectacle with personal drama as the Freemen confront the Harkonnen presence and as Paul's role becomes more clearly defined. The Freemen use the land to their advantage, and small victories show how determination and cohesion can challenge entrenched power. Paul accepts that he must be more than air. He must be a man who blends prophecy with practical action. Yet he also fears the scale of worship that could turn into violence, and the film does not let him forget that prophecy can be a double-edged sword. These closing scenes prepare viewers for the continuation of the story while keeping the present events meaningful and complete enough to teach. The movie ends this first part with both victory and with a clear sense that a larger struggle is only beginning. The last images focus on Paul standing with the Freemen and on the choices that will define the next stage of his life. He has gained a place among the people of the desert, and the screen closes with a sense of both promise and danger. Jessica stands beside him, proud but aware that greater storms lie ahead, and Cheney watches with a mixture of love and practical caution. The film leaves many threads open to be resolved in the next part, but it gives a satisfying arc of growth, of loss, and of new belonging. This ending is pedagogically useful because it allows learners to discuss resolution, open questions, and narrative pacing. Overall, the movie teaches listeners how world building, character growth, and moral complexity can combine into a story that is both epic and intimate. If you want to use this text directly for your long video, you can read each paragraph slowly and clearly, pausing between paragraphs for effect and to let viewers absorb new vocabulary. The script is written to allow you to add short examples, picture captions, or on-screen vocabulary lists after any paragraph. For English learners, consider inserting brief definitions of key terms, such as fiefholder, siege, spice, and Bene Gesserit, right after the paragraphs that mention them. You can also add short, simple review questions at the end of each section to encourage active listening. Those small teaching moves will make your long video both engaging and highly educational. If you like, I can now format this script into timed segments for voiceover, or prepare subtitle-ready text so you can paste it into your editing software.